Good evening, everyone. My name is Tanner Menard, and I'm the organizing manager at Equality Arizona. Our mission is to build a strong and resilient LGBTQ plus social movement and culture in Arizona by increasing access to safety, well-being, and inclusion in society. This is the first in a series of town halls that are meant to expand our conversation beyond policy and towards the heart of why we work for the people in our community. Today, we'll be in conversation with Angela Hughey, Tyler Deaton, and Michael Soto to discuss equality and fairness for all Americans. We'd like to encourage everyone to sign up for volunteer opportunities to help our rights as LGBTQ Arizonans, and links will be available in the chat or in whatever medium we post. On February 17th, we have a focus group for people in Tucson. On February 26th, a focus group for folks in Southern Arizona. And on February 26th, from 1 to 5 p.m., we have a phone bank. We also have a community needs survey that will be posted as well. I would like to now let our guests introduce themselves rather than just reading bios. I'll just let each and every person introduce themselves. We'll start with Angela, we'll go to Tyler, and then Michael, if you'd like to introduce yourself. And then we'll get started. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you, Tanner. I'm Angela Hughey. I'm the co-founder and president of One Community.
Hey, my name is Tyler Deaton. I am the senior advisor to American Unity Fund and American Unity PAC.
And I'm Michael Soto. I'm the CEO of Equality Arizona, and I'm super excited to be here with everybody tonight.
One of the important bills that Equality Arizona is spearheading is the Equality and Fairness for All Americans Act. And I was just wondering if we could talk about that, but also just, I'd like to hear how each of you got involved in LGBTQ activism. What were you going through at the time? You know, what were the community conditions around you that precipitated your decision to pursue activism? And how does that relate to the work that you're doing right now? And whoever would like to go first can get started.
You want me to dive in? I'll dive in.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was like 4 questions, right? So I'm going to go back in time. I actually was working in the Hispanic community in Arizona, and I worked with community relations managers with a number of large corporate entities around the state. And I noticed a trend that a number of them were going through title changes. They all became multicultural. They were Hispanic community relations managers, and they all became multicultural community relations managers. And I was out, which was not the norm in the workplace probably 15 years ago in the great state of Arizona. But because I was out, I was able to ask the important questions. And that was, okay, you're going through title changes, you're becoming multicultural. Do you have money to spend in the LGBTQ community? And what all of my community relations peers said was yes. And then my next question was, how are you spending it? And they all said, well, we don't understand. We don't understand the complexities of the community, the diversity of the community. When we look at advertising opportunities, I represent conservative healthcare company, or I represent a conservative company that does XYZ, and like I can't get marketing clearance to place my ad next to like a 1-800-gay chat ad. And which I totally got, because my partner and I, always were like, we don't see ourselves in the advertising publications that were available in Arizona. And so basically we just really discovered that there was a void that needed to be filled. And what I love about our LGBTQ community.
Hello.
Hello.
I would love to.
Wow. Maybe they liked what I was saying. But what I love about our community is that we're a part of every culture, right? We are every socioeconomic background. We are every culture. We are every generation. And so we created a business plan and put our life savings into this little business called One Community. Went and got married in California on our first and only gay cruise. It was so gay. and people weren't out, and we were out, and just really thought that the way to move people towards LGBTQ inclusion really was through this idea of consumer activism. And so one community's first tagline was, "You vote with your wallet every day." And we went on a remarkable, what's now 13-year journey of really spending time and a lot of cups of coffee, never being in a hurry, really teaching the business community who LGBTQ Arizonans are as consumers of their products, and then also as professionals in their ranks. And so that's how we got started at One Community. And then we evolved into activism through the Unity Pledge. So we were just accidentally prepared for SB 1062 because we wanted to celebrate businesses and organizations that understood that LGBTQ inclusion was the right thing to do. And yeah, here we are now.
Thank you.
I can jump in. So we have to go back a couple of decades. I think I was trying to think of like how I actually got involved in LGBTQ advocacy and activism, and I think it was really just a very natural progression. I was raised in a family that was really involved in sort of civic life and really valued that, and also raised in the LDS church, a church that really values people being engaged in community and in civic life. And so as soon as I came out, I pretty much just jumped in and was like, well, what can I do that will make the community better, right? That will contribute in some meaningful way. And so I found myself getting involved right away in activism and in advocacy. And one of the first things that I got involved in was at Arizona State University. The non-discrimination policy at the time did not include gender identity. And so I found myself working with other students, organizing, and then working with Equality Arizona at the time. It was called the Arizona Human Rights Fund, but they had some volunteer lawyers on their board that worked with us. And basically we lobbied the administration at ASU and presented a case and wrote a new policy and did the research of all the other universities that had gender identity included, and lobbied the administration until they agreed to change it, essentially. And so that was sort of my introduction into the impact that policy can have on changing the climate on a campus, and to improving people's lives. And I just became really passionate about it after that, and kind of never looked back, and just kept going and getting involved at different levels of government and with different organizations. And it's I find it kind of fun that today I'm the CEO of Equality Arizona, from this student volunteer that got involved back in the day, and now being able to run this organization has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Again, my name is Tyler Deaton. I run American Unity Fund and American Unity PAC. I want to decide which version of my activism I want to share, because I was at first going to talk about like my first really like political out of the closet job, but that's kind of boring. So I'm going to talk instead about something I did when I was still in the closet in college. So I grew up in the Deep South. I grew up halfway between Georgia and Alabama in what I think is for the South, a pretty normal conservative Christian family. Great household, had anything, I would have ever desired. But, knew from about the time I was 4 or 5 years old that I was different, and I was, didn't really know exactly what the word for it was yet, but I had a gigantic crush on the pastor's son, who was also my age. And I was just like, this cannot really be normal. I was like, I think this is what they're talking about in Sunday school that is not allowed. Like, I was just starting to get some inklings that something was different. And of course, as I got older, getting into, second grade, third grade, you start to go to sex ed, you start to learn things. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm gay. And just had to wrestle with that for my entire childhood in this really conservative Christian environment, which I then chose to go to Wheaton College in Illinois, which is also a very conservative Christian school. And I'm so happy I made that choice because my freshman year, I met my now husband, and we're 35 years old, and we've now been together for 17 years, since we were 18 years old, and we met at Wheaton. And I don't think we would have met if I had not gone to Wheaton. But at Wheaton College, it's actually against the rules to be gay. And there's a lot of other rules, like you can't dance, you can't smoke, you can't swear. There's also, other, like, you can't do hard drugs. Like, there's other rules that maybe are a little more obvious, but like, you can't even dance. I'm pretty sure I broke all of the rules, including the gay one. But while I was there, just in a almost very random happenstance of events, I was the freshman class president, and it was 2004. And so you have to go back mentally to what was going on in 2004. It was presidential election, George W. Bush versus John Kerry, and this little thing called the Federal Marriage Amendment. And my little Christian college in Illinois was trying, and the student government was trying to pass a resolution to support the Federal Marriage Amendment. This was the marriage amendment. This would have, written into the United States Constitution a ban on same-sex marriage. And there was this effort being led by some national groups to try to get, young people more involved on the anti same-sex marriage side of things. They were probably trying to be very clever because young people are overwhelmingly pro-gay. And so they were like, no, we're going to go to the Christian college campuses and we're going to pass some resolutions. Well, this came up, and it was one of my very first meetings in student government. And I was like, well, this is not right. It's like, I don't like this, but keeping in mind, I'm in the closet, and I'm like, how do I oppose this without outing myself? And it just became this really bizarre, uncomfortable exercise where I feel, in hindsight, I was really going out of my way to really be extra straight. And I don't care about this because I'm gay, but why should we take a position on this? Or why should a college student government, and all of these process arguments, which probably helped shape some of where I am today politically. But it was just this really profound moment in my life whenever I saw other student leaders take my side, some of whom, by the way, now, decade and a half later, a couple of them have come out of the closet, like me, but also most of them haven't. And they were allies in this really super conservative evangelical environment in 2004, when we were all young, 18 to 22 years old. And a couple of those people are still my really good friends. And actually, one of them is a straight ally that she works in the movement today, of all things. She actually works for a national organization that's working for LGBT non-discrimination. And just the way that comes back up in my life in so many ways, that today I still now work with some of the leaders of that college to try to find common ground. And that's been a really healing part of my life. But it's just such a weird way that I think I had my first political moment, Tanner, of trying to reconcile my personal identity with my politics and the environment. And I think that there were a lot of things that I learned there that when I reflect on it, I realize how much that shaped me.
Thank you so much for that. I grew up in the Deep South also. I'm from Louisiana. My family is very Catholic, but we're Creole and we're indigenous. So for me, I grew up in a similar way. I started doing HIV work when I was in my early 20s, but I was also an experimental composer and doing sort of activist music. And I think that, a really foundational event for me was 9/11, because I became very anti-war. I got involved in pretty left-wing politics. And I think that that's informed a lot of my life. But at the same time, I worked on my tribal council, and I'm a traditional healer. And I run sweat lodges. I've also become sort of a meditation coach. So for me, I feel like when Standing Rock happened and when the Trump administration was elected, I got very activated in a sort of very polarized way. But when the quarantine happened, something happened inside of me, and I started looking at myself and what was going on in the world. I mean, and I'm saying that in a very genuine way. And I started asking myself, like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And I really started working on sort of depolarizing myself. And so, and because I've always had this kind of dichotomy between, like, you know, the real needs of our community, but also the needs of myself as a spiritual being. So I'm really excited. I mean, it's a real thing. It's a real thing that I think that most people in the LGBTQ community go through, is this kind of like need for spirituality, need for that sort of community, and feeling sometimes isolated from it. And it's a painful feeling. So I'm really excited about the work that's being done here. So I'm just wondering if you could all talk about this this act, why you're working on it, what it means to interact with the faith community, those sorts of things. If you could just kind of talk about that from your own perspective, that would be wonderful.
You want me to go? This is a beautiful journey that I think really starts 7 years ago in Mesa, Arizona, with a center-right LDS mayor who we meet probably 10 days into his first term. And it's me and Sheila Clafcorn. And I think we took Bryce Cook with us, who is LDS and has children that are LGBTQ. And we sat with Mayor Giles, and this was on his like top priority list. He had a whiteboard in his office. And this was so incredibly important. He wanted to get it done because he knew it was the right thing to do. And Mesa had been doing some survey work around non-discrimination and how people felt in Mesa, right? And whether or not they felt like they were a part of the larger Mesa community. And there was clearly work that needed to be done. But, you know, there was a lot of work that needed to happen in Mesa to get to a point where we could have an LGBTQ inclusive ordinance. And so, you know, here we were we were in the pandemic, and, you know, everyone was isolating. And the mayor got to a place where he said, I think we can take a run at this, right? And so the opportunity to collaborate, right? And I mean, this is a testament to trust, right? Because Michael and I, organizationally, I don't think have ever been really put in a place where we were supposed to get along. I think that organizations have kind of said, let's keep them divided, right? And we've been kind of pitted against one another. And we just said, we can do this and let's do it together. And so first and foremost, this starts with trust. And I'm so grateful to Michael for trusting me. And I'm so grateful, you know, for the trust that he puts in this work that we're doing collaboratively. And then again, it comes to the trust of Mayor John Giles and his city council, and really ensuring that we were creating an opportunity for something that we could all celebrate. And as we went into, you know, the Mesa ordinance vote, you know, Arizona is home to really deep-seated anti-LGBTQ opposition. And one of those opposition groups like threatened the mayor publicly in the study session and was very threatening during the city council meeting, which of course, all of this is happening via Zoom. And but what came out of it is, I think when we're really vulnerable, you have the opportunity for people to show you who they truly are. And to meet not just the mayor where he was at, but his 4 council members and the courage that they showed. Councilmember Julie Spielsberry was a freshman city council member. She's LDS. She received upwards of 1,200 emails, many of them from people of faith that were absolutely opposed to her support of this ordinance. And she walked alongside of us, and she came out on the other side as this remarkable ally, just as Mayor Giles did, and Vice Mayor Duff, and council members Luna and Heredia, right? It was like it was this really remarkable experience. And we celebrated, and it was really joyful. And then we were all threatened, right? Because the opportunity for this ordinance to go away, to be put on the ballot November of this year approached. And so we were vulnerable, and we had to trust one another. And the people of faith in the city of Mesa, and the business leaders and the community leaders and our LGBTQ community came together, and we had just this remarkable group of volunteers that worked on our Mesa Loves Everyone campaign, right? And to make a long story short, like, we were successful. And one of the reasons we were successful is because in the middle of that campaign, when we were in one of the most vulnerable moments, we had a phone call with leaders of the LDS Church. And they came out. They came out in support of the Mesa ordinance. And that's an experience that we all went through that will bind us for the rest of our lives, right? When you hear Tyler talking about, the proposed marriage ban in the petitions at Wheaton College, you'll never forget what those experiences are with the people that stood with you. And we are all absolutely bound together now. And I think that we're here today, and I'll give it over to Michael and Tyler from here, but I think we're here today because we trust one another, and because we have the audacity to dream. And just because it's difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, right?
My gosh, how do we follow that? That was amazing, and so right on. I mean, I think this work, the work with Angela and One Community, the mayor, the city council in Mesa, the work that we've been doing with Tyler, just taking this to the federal level, right? Doing this work with the many different churches that are involved, the different faith organizations, the many different LGBTQ organizations. For me, it's the most meaningful work that I think I've ever done in LGBTQ equality work. I think it's just incredible work, because it dares to ask the question, what if we do this differently, right? What if we actually don't create greater division, create deeper sides and partisanship? What if we say, we live in this amazing country that has so many different kinds of people from so many different walks of life, and what if we dare to do policy work that actually takes all of that into consideration and creates law that respects all of those kinds of people, right? And that's not how a lot of work is done around policy these days. And it's really fun to be a part of a group of people that says, what can we agree on? And like, where do we have commonality, and where can we see each other as people, as siblings, as brothers and sisters, right? As fellow human beings. And how can we work together to make this country get a little bit closer through policy to the great American ideals, right? Of liberty for all, of freedom for all. Like, those are wonderful aspirational things. And it's just, I mean, for me, it's been such a beautiful experience. I'm just so glad that I get to be a part of it. It's also been a really healing experience, as an LGBTQ person who grew up in a very conservative faith. That was one of my biggest concerns coming out, was how do I reconcile my childhood, where I've always known I'm different than I was supposed to be, with my future, right? And who I'm going to be in the future, and being able to be my authentic self. That was hard, and that has been a long process to kind of figure that out and search for community that values LGBTQ people and being a person of deeply held faith, right? And both of those things are really important. And it's just really wonderful for me. I don't know, and for Ange and Tyler, I mean, I think for all of us, we've been in these rooms where we're having these complex conversations and finding agreement amongst LGBTQ people and people of faith from conservative faiths and not necessarily theologically affirming faiths, and really finding a way forward together. And that's been just really healing and beautiful. And we've developed these wonderful friendships like Angela was talking to. It's pretty amazing to, I don't know, I guess, let all the rhetoric go and see other people for fellow human beings and develop a path forward with them and develop really valuable, trusted relationships with people. I certainly have loved every second of it.
Well, I don't have a philosophical answer. I just have a sort of a political hack type answer consistent with who I am, which is I think the culture war sucks. It's bad for our people, especially young people. Like young gay and trans kids are hurt the worst by this prolonged culture war. So I'm for ending the endless culture war by any means possible. And I'm for ending it as quickly as possible on as many fronts as possible, right? Like I just feel like anything that we can do to take down another is to our advantage. And to me, I carry multiple identities. We all do, but I'm not just a guy. I'm gay, I'm Christian, I'm conservative. Like I get, these are all complicated things. We all live with that. We all have cross-cutting identities. I argue with myself. So it doesn't surprise me that I would argue with other people, but we live in this great, big, gigantic, democratic country that we're fighting for a lot of things. We're fighting for a lot of values. And one of those is the right to live our lives and to respect the ability for other people to live their lives. And I think that that's something that we've lost, that I'm trying to help people reclaim, is how you can agree to disagree, that we can set public policy that creates the right boundaries, that we can have First Amendment protections for everybody. And I do come back to that. If I'm going to be philosophical about anything, it would be about the First Amendment. And it's important to me as a gay guy to remember that the First Amendment was there for us as a community when we were extremely unpopular and whenever nobody liked us, when nobody wanted us to have any organizations, they did not want us to have pride parades, they didn't want us to be able to speak publicly. I mean, like really basic stuff that today we take for granted, but we had to sue, we had to use the legal system and the protections of the First Amendment to protect ourselves. And I don't want us to now turn around, now that we have won a lot. We've won a lot. We haven't won everything, but we've won a lot. I don't want us to ever turn around and deny those same freedoms to anyone else. That would be wrong. And including to people who disagree with us vehemently. I want to have the space to have those disagreements and lower the stakes, right? I want us to have those disagreements, but you don't have to worry that somebody's going to lose their job or lose their home or lose their tax exempt status or just all of these kinds of existential threats. That I want to lower those temperatures for everybody. And starting with gay and trans people, like we are still disproportionately unemployed. We have lower incomes than the rest of the population. We're more likely to have health issues. We're more likely to have, suicidal thoughts. Like there's so many other problems that we have, that I like to come back to those basics, that we're fighting for jobs, we're fighting for homes, and we're fighting for yes, the right of other people who disagree with us to have those same basic freedoms, that they should have a job, they should have a home. We need to lower the stakes. And so to me, it really is like end the endless culture war. I don't think we profit from it. I think that the people who profit from that are not good people. That's as philosophical as I can probably be, is like the people who are benefiting from the endless culture war, whoever they are, that's not who I am. I don't want to be like them. And I would rather be aligned with the people who share that value, that let's lower the temperature, lower the stakes, find common ground, embrace the mystery within ourselves, that we have multiple identities, and then legislate based on that. And so that's why Tanner, maybe people are already familiar with this proposal in Arizona, but the Equality and Fairness for All Act embodies those values, that you can respect sexual orientation, gender identity, and religion at the same time, that the conflict among these characteristics is dramatically exaggerated and overhyped. And I think that's something we look at, is like, who is it that is benefiting from exaggerating the conflict? And who is it that benefits if we reconcile? And my argument on that is like, it's like 98% of us we're the ones who benefit if we reconcile. and especially the people who are more disadvantaged. They benefit the most from reconciliation. I've been through this with my own family coming out. I already mentioned I'm from a very conservative Christian family. Like, I've seen how this played out in my own family, that you can't really hate up close. It's easy to hate from a distance, but you can't hate up close. And we've got to have a lot more of that in Arizona, in a lot of other states, nationally. We need more proximity, more closeness, and we have to embrace any discomfort that there is in that. It's worth it, because on the other side, we're going to be safer, happier, healthier, wealthier, have more opportunity to pursue the American dream. And so the Equality and Fairness for All Arizonans Act is basically the public policy statement of those pluralistic values.
That's so incredible. I mean, I know that what I noticed for myself is, I guess, like the way that I talk about it for myself. And I've been in graduate school where I'm in a situation, where the temperature is very, very polarized. And so for me to do, I'm in literature, so for me to write in that environment is even hostile, right? So the way that I describe it is that we need to develop a greater capacity to hold diversity in our mind without getting pushed in one direction or the next. Because I think like the vast majority of people agree with one thing here and one thing there and don't like what's going on. I think most people don't like what's going on in the country. And so going into the next question, I'm just curious, if you could talk about what the next 20 years would look like if we don't get a national discrimination ordinance passed now.
Well, can I go first this time?
Yeah, please.
Change up the order. So I have a short answer on this, which is that if everybody's at least watching what's happening with the courts, and I mean the federal court system, then that is basically the entirety of the answer for me, which is that if we just let all of these issues get sorted out in the federal courts, that will not be to our advantage, Tanner. The courts have become much more conservative. And, this is another kind of one of those questions where it's like, pick your poison. You're going to get some issues where you're going to get what you want. No one's going to get 100% of what they want. And that's the point, is that it's just going to go to judges who are going to make these decisions, and they don't have the same tools in the toolkit to make narrowly crafted policy judgments the same way that a legislature could, whether that's a state, even a city council, a county commission. All layers of representative government can do so much more with like careful legislating that a judge is just not even given the option of. And so that's what I worry about, is that we are choosing by doing nothing. Like, that is a choice. Inaction is a choice. Inaction is a form of action. And we want to think carefully about what the consequence of that is and who basically becomes the decider. So if it's not the people, and if it's not the people through our representatives, that does not mean that the decisions won't be made. They'll be made by somebody else. And I would rather wrestle with these issues in a bipartisan way with elected Republicans and Democrats at all levels of government, rather than just hand this over to the courts, especially as where we've seen the trajectory of the courts go in the last 5 years.
I agree with everything that Tyler just said. Absolutely. I also think the cultural impact is that instead of ending the culture wars and taking the division out of that fire, taking the fuel out of that fire to divide us and create, more clear sides, more vitriol, that we actually engage further in that if we don't do something that counters that. Because right now, all signs point to that worsening. It has every year for quite a few years, right? We are living in a society where people perceive that we are more divided, that we have less in common as a people, as a nation, as communities, and that isn't good for democracy. That's not good for our country. That isn't good for our smaller communities. Like, that's not good for anybody. And so I think that if we don't get this legislation passed, everything Tyler said, and the social impact is also that we don't have a pathway out of this hyper divided, hyper partisanship. And there are people that are trying to lead us out of that, right? There's Senator Sinema, right? There are leaders, there are people, there are organizations trying to say there's a better path for this. You can get out of this mindset, you can get out of this way of doing politics and living life. But people aren't quite there and following just yet, because the voices saying, and the folks who benefit largely from us being divided, from the vitriol, from the hyperpartisanship, are louder, right? And so we have to contribute substantively to this idea that policy should be done through bipartisan means, that governing doesn't need to be about ideological purity and should not be about ideological purity. It should be about creating laws that allow the best in our pluralistic society to occur, to take place, and for people to thrive under those ideals. And so, without it, it's a long 2 decades and a long road back, a longer and longer road back each year to a place where we have any sort of sense of being a common people, being a nation that's working towards something together.
If I could just interject before Angela speaks, and just kind of frame the question more towards specifically though for like the LGBTQ community, with the kind of like bills that we see coming through the legislature right now, both at the national and state levels. What's it going to be like for our community without a national law? I mean, what are people going to go through? And what are they going through now? You know what I mean? Like, I want people to understand that, because we want to activate people to get involved. We need people to be involved to change these laws. And so if maybe I would like to hear from that perspective.
No pressure, right, Tanner? So first, I want to say that I agree with everything that Tyler and Michael said. Secondly, I want to say that the deep polarization is very loud, but I don't believe it's where the majority of Arizonans are at. And I don't believe where it's the majority of Americans are at. But we have to be strong enough to lead people and give them the opportunity to participate in something that is more unifying, right? And if you want to know what's going to happen, I don't know that we can look 20 years into the future all the way, but listen, there's a reason why Arizona has 15 anti-LGBTQ pieces of legislation introduced this year. And that reason is the city of Mesa, the city of Scottsdale, the city of Glendale, and the town of Tucson, all passing LGBTQ inclusive ordinances that add protections to over 1 million Arizonans, right, in a 90-day period of time. So it's getting really, really hot in the kitchen, because we're getting closer to a place where LGBTQ people in this great state and in this great nation are leveling the playing field. And we do have the opportunity to have policy that protects LGBTQ Arizonans and LGBTQ Americans. And it's a clock that's ticking too. So for us, I think this isn't about the next 20 years. This is about June, right? We have an opportunity to pass bipartisan, inclusive legislation by June of this year. And if we don't pass it by June of this year, then we really think that next opportunity nationally could be literally a decade away, because of redistricting and because of the balance of power in Washington, right? And so if we don't pass federal legislation by June of this year, then we're going to resort to the states. Then it's going to be the state of Arizona doing all the work we can to pass equality and fairness for all Arizonans, and a similar type piece of legislation running in the great state of Georgia and in North Carolina and in Wyoming and West Virginia. And you're going to keep that bubbling up happening, but it'll probably, unfortunately, most likely be another decade before we have another pass of doing this on a national level. And so I hope that people hear the call to volunteer and to phone bank and understand the urgency. Sometimes folks tend to get more activated when we feel like things are on fire. And what I'm here to say is our future is on fire, right? If we don't activate right now, if we don't all put our shoulder to the wheel and work together and meet one another where we're at and pass what is really good comprehensive legislation by June of this year, then we've got another decade ahead of us.
Before I open it up to the audience, and thank you all so much. This is like a really exciting conversation, so thank you. My last question before I open it up to people in this space is, what specifically can people do to help your organizations and this particular cause? What do you see as things that just average people in Arizona that belong to our community can do?
Okay, I'll jump in. So the first thing that they can do is they can go to the website. So anybody can go to the website equalityandfairness.com and you can show your support for this work. This is a really easy way for you to sign on to this work, to endorse it as an organization, as an individual in many ways. And we think this is really important because it shows a critical mass of support. Something that we hear over and over from elected leaders is at every level of government, right? Is show me who supports this idea. And so by you signing on, by you sharing it with all of your friends, your family, and your community and asking them to sign on as well, by sharing it with business owners that you know, by sharing it with faith leaders that you know, we get to build that critical mass that says, you know what, we actually do believe that there's a better way to do this. And there's a way to get these protections that actually unifies multiple communities instead of creating more division. And there's a real path forward that the Senate today could make happen, right, if they chose to. And so we need people signing on to that, supporting it, and sharing it widely and loudly. Also, as constituents and as voters, you have a right to talk to your elected officials. And so at the Arizona state level and at the US federal level, you should be talking to your senators, to your members of your House of Representatives members, and saying, I believe in this work, I support the ideals, I support the way it's being done, and I want to see elected leaders from both sides of the aisle coming together to do this kind of work. And we want you to be a part of this greater coalition. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do is, as citizens, communicating with the people that we elect to govern us and saying, this is what we want. This is how we want you to show up. And here's an entire community that's willing to walk that with you, right? That's willing to do that work with you.
No one ever wants to follow Michael. Because he's just, I think Tyler and I just want to say ditto. Yeah, and so everything that Michael just said, and remember that the Equality and Fairness for All Arizonans bill will get a hearing, right? And so on a local level, log on to the request to speak, put your thumbs up when it gets a hearing, register to speak and come out and speak in support of equality and fairness for all Arizonans. It's really actionable and it's going to positively impact the people in the great state of Arizona, but there's a bubble up effect too, right? That will really, I think, put a microphone out there throughout our nation, should we be successful in the great state of Arizona. And I want to kind of demonstrate the landscape throughout the United States right now. I don't know how many anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced throughout the US. I'm going to guess it's in the hundreds, right? But there's only one positive piece of legislation that's been introduced in 2022, and that's equality and fairness for all Arizonans. So the time is now, and we're asking you to come stand beside us and to participate and to share your voice so that we can get this over the line, because if we can do it in Arizona, and we know we can do it in our great nation.
Thank you so much. I would like to open it up to anyone that has joined the call. If you have any questions, you can either put it in the chat, or if you would like to just ask your question directly.
So since it's quiet, I'll go. If I'm cutting anybody off, feel free to wave at me or something. So my name's Shauna Cruz, as you can see on the screen there, and I am one of these people that you guys are talking about. So I am not with a group or an organization or any specific cause. I am a voter, I'm an ally, I'm an advocate. And my question is really sort of around sort of what you started to touch on, which is how do you activate the me's, I guess, because you've got people that work full time, aren't well, I'm probably more versed in politics than some, so are even less versed than I am, and I would not consider myself to be anywhere near an expert, right? Don't have the bandwidth between what happens in the rest of their lives, raising families, going to work, etc., to know all of this stuff, right? And I consider myself to be pretty persistent and dogged and diligent, and I've been trying to get involved to the right people, putting my resources in the right place, and it's been a challenge. And usually, I'm more resourceful than the average Joe, and I'm not toting my own horn, but that's kind of that type A in me. Anyway, all of that to be said is, I agree, activating the me's is critical for the success, but knowing that you guys are typically small, nonprofit, kind of lean organizations, what is the strategy or the tactics that you plan to use moving forward to get to the me's, or to properly use the me's, being somebody that isn't with a group or doesn't do this as part of a nonprofit such as yourselves that are talking?
So that's a great question. I think a continual question for the kind of work that we do. And so we try to be a resource. And I think we all are putting out as much information as possible. If you look at the website that Angela put in the chat, it will walk you through the work that we're doing on the federal level. And then we're using that model here in the state of Arizona as well for the state bill that we're doing. So it walks you through everything. There are videos, right, that'll kind of give you the whole framework. The whole framework for the bill is up there. We do these kinds of informational sessions. We've done so many of these at this point that I can't even count. Actually, I think Angela and I have done 2 or 3 today alone. And so we try to be a resource to get really good information out there. Jean is on this call. Jean is our policy and communications director. And when it comes to the legislature, she's putting out, oh my gosh, I don't know, almost a communication a day. I mean, she's putting out multiple amazing communications explaining what's happening at the Capitol, and what's happening with different bills and how everybody can get involved in that and what those opportunities are. And then from that, we rely on folks like you, Shauna, that do come to these calls, that do read the emails, that do get engaged, for you to share that information with people in your network. And we're hoping that over time, more and more folks, right? And we've a wonderful core constituency of community members and advocates and allies that are already engaged with us, but we want to add even more people to that. And you can get involved working with Tanner and Onekachi to get connected to community members that are already engaged with us, so that you kind of have a community of people, right? You have friends who live near you, who in your part of Arizona, who are doing this and passionate about this advocacy and the citizen advocacy as well, so that you've got a community, and then you're better able to share with the people in your life. And that's really, it's a kind of a strange thing, but also kind of a beautiful and amazing thing how American politics works that way of, people trust you, the people in your life trust you a lot more than they trust an organization, right? Or people that they've never spoken to and don't know. And so the more we can give you what you need to be an informed advocate, and then the more you share that, that's how it grows, right? That's how we grow more and more people engaged in this work.
Before we get to Heidi's question, I'm going to jump in and speak real quick to this as well. Shauna, if you look in the chat, I put our website. We recently updated it. Jean just did an incredible website update. We've also been putting some links into the chat. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is starting regional political education chapter meetings. And from those meetings, we're also going to be doing things like phone banking leading up to the election, as well as canvassing. So one thing that you could do is to sign up for the phone bank that we listed in the chat, because it's also going to include our first ever chapter meeting. And one thing that you could do is to help start a chapter in your community and help start training people on what it means to be a citizen in the United States. So that's going to be one of our strategies leading up to the election. And we also are collecting stories from LGBTQ people. You can find that in the chat. And I'm seeing also that I just want to thank you, Shauna, for being at the Capitol yesterday and for doing this kind of work already. And then now I'd like to just invite Heidi to ask her question, and then we'll start to wrap up this call. Thank you so much for that question.
Y'all, thank you so much for having me this evening. I appreciate it. I'm Heidi with the Tucson LGBT Chamber of Commerce. And I feel like I think I've got my questions answered, but if I could just tell you a little bit about what we do in our advocacy committee, and then maybe I'm looking, I guess, for more resources, how we can support what we can do as a chamber to support. We are currently, broadcasting on social media, talking about the 14 bills that are in legislature currently that are anti-gay, anti-trans. And we're keeping updates on those. We're also encouraging our members to join the RTS, to join the lobby day, either virtually or in person, all those type of things. I see some excellent phone bank information, so thank you for that. I did not have that before, and a couple websites that I will check out and refer as well. What can you recommend as a business community type organization? What can you recommend to us? How can we support? How can we get the word out there? Thank you.
So Heidi, a couple of things. We have a meeting with your team on Friday. So we're going to dive deeper, find out ways to support and partner. But we have a really wonderful co-authored letter about it's time to unite, not divide. And I could put that in the link. I know that your chamber signed it, but sharing that with your members and asking them to sign on to the letter would be really, really helpful. We've had close to 300 business and faith-based organizations sign this letter, and it's being very impactful, right? Because to Michael's point, we are setting the tone that we are asking our elected officials to follow. We're saying we don't want this divisiveness. And so we are sending updates to folks that work at the Capitol every couple of weeks right now. And so that's being really helpful. The other thing is we absolutely would love for the Tucson LGBTQ Chamber to sign on to equality and fairness for all Americans, and join a number of member-based associations, including the Arizona Tech Council and the Phoenix Equality Chamber, in support of the Equality and Fairness for All Americans framework, and then giving us the opportunity to do a presentation about equality and fairness for all Americans and why the bill that was introduced last Monday is so important. And we can consistently share additional ways for folks to get even more involved. But we don't know what we don't know. So put us in front of your folks if you feel that this is the type of framework that you all can get behind and support. And we encourage you all to add your names to the letter.
Fantastic. We will for sure. That's very, very helpful information. Thank you, Angela. And yes, we would love to have y'all do a presentation for the chamber. We have a monthly breakfast that's currently on Zoom, and it's a lot of fun, but I think you could reach a lot of folks that maybe wouldn't otherwise participate. So we would love to have y'all come and do the things and tell us all about it, give resources. And I look forward to the meeting on Friday as well. Thank you.
Heidi, I've put my email in the chat for you. I would love for you to reach out to me. Tomorrow evening, we're hosting a focus group specifically for people in Tucson. So I'd love it if you personally signed up for the focus group and maybe brought some people with you. And also next week, on next Thursday, we're going to be having a focus group for rural Southern Arizona. we genuinely want to know what the community needs are in Southern Arizona so that we can create organizing strategies that are specific to the needs of those communities. And I would also love to speak with you about the possibility of helping us to, whether it was through the chamber or whether it was just something that you knew a few people, but we would love for you to maybe have, participate in some political education trainings and then learn how to train people to do that work in your own community. So you can reach out to us about that if you would like to as well. So
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you. I will be sure to reach out. That sounds fantastic. I think tomorrow is training for lobby day, so I don't know if I'll be able to attend the meeting unless it's by chance 2 different times, but I will absolutely reach out and make it to the next one. I appreciate the invite, and we're eager and willing to learn. We have a lot to learn, but we're willing to do the work. So thank you.
thank you so much. We appreciate you being here. And with that, unless anyone else has something else they'd like to add, I would just like to thank Michael, Tyler, Angela, everyone who joined the call, all of our team at Equality Arizona. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you for your commitment to the LGBTQ community, and thank you for having the thought to unite and not divide. And with that, we'll just, we'll call it a day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tanner.